finish it off the way it has to be done. The alleged words of Sri Lanka's Defence Secretary to one of his senior commanders in the final days of Sri Lanka's civil war, the alleged trigger for a bloodbath. Channel 4 has documented the overwhelming video evidence that has emerged from Sri Lanka, but now, for the first time, we have serious allegations as to who gave the orders, and if our witnesses are to be believed, they came from the very top. A leading human rights lawyer has told us that their testimony is prima facie evidence of possible war crimes. There are distressing images in Jonathan Miller's exclusive report.
In the dying days of a long civil war, Sri Lankan forces moved in for the kill on the last surviving Tamil Tigers. Tens of thousands of civilians were being held as human shields by rebel fighters on a tiny shard of land. The president said no civilians were killed by the army. The UN says that up to 40,000 civilians died, though, and the final days of the conflict have been described as an orgy of murderous violence by Sri Lankan soldiers. Over the past 2 years, this channel's broadcast powerful video evidence of war crimes. Now, for the first time, 2 eyewitnesses have risked their lives to actually name those whom they say ordered war crimes.
We received orders from the top to kill some of those who surrendered. All regiments received the orders unofficially.
When he said finish it off in the way it has to be done, it meant they didn't worry about whether civilians would be killed. All they wanted was for the war to be over.
Tonight, we name the accused, and we confront them.
Sir, you're accused of war crimes. Can I ask what your response is to this, please?
Me?
The war which tore Sri Lanka apart for 3 decades was, by May 2009, approaching its endgame, with 130,000 civilians trapped along a small strip of beach. The government called this the no-fire zone, but it was no such thing. May the 15th, and 2 army divisions converge on the beach, cutting off any last hope of escape for the LTTE rebels, now completely surrounded. Trapped with them, the civilians. Under constant rocket and mortar fire, the government determined to crush the rebels once and for all. 2 days later, the war was finally over. Fernando was on the front line in those last days. We're protecting his real identity. Tearfully, he recounted the apocalyptic horrors he'd witnessed.
They shot people at random, stabbed people, raped them, cut out their tongues, cut women's breasts off. I have witnessed this with my own eyes. I saw the naked dead bodies of women without heads and other parts of their bodies. I saw a lot of small, innocent children getting killed in large numbers. I saw people soaked in blood. They could do whatever they wanted there. It was their empire. The soldiers at the battlefront, their hearts had turned to stone. Having seen blood, killings, death for so long, they had lost their sense of humanity. It was as though they had turned into vampires.
Brigadier Shavendra Silva was commander of 5/8 Division. It was his troops you just heard described. 4 days before the war ended, Fernando attended a meeting on the beach at which Brigadier Shavendra Silva addressed his officer corps. According to Fernando, the brigadier told his officers he'd received a telephone call from this man. He is Sri Lanka's Defence Secretary, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, brother of the president and one of 3 brothers who rule Sri Lanka. These orders were right from the top. The brigadier told his officers that the orders from Gotabaya Rajapaksa were to finish the job by whatever means necessary. War crimes lawyers tell us that what the brigadier said is credible evidence that war crimes were directed by political leaders.
He said, "This is a very decisive day for us because last night I got a call from the Defence Secretary. He told me that we only have a small chunk of land to capture. Do whatever it takes, however it is done. By noon, I want to hear good news from you. And with that, the story of this war should come to an end. If you want any further instruction to accomplish this, call me. Finish it off in the way it has to be done."
What followed was the killing spree that Fernando then witnessed. On the very last day of the war, 2 of the political leaders of the LTTE tried to surrender. According to mediators, the Sri Lankan president guaranteed their safe passage if they and their families and 300 fighters came out waving white flags. That's not how it worked out. Channel 4 News has spoken to an officer from 5/8 Division who told us that Gotabaya Rajapaksa again called Brigadier Shivendra Silva and ordered him to execute the surrendering rebels.
2 majors were ordered to receive the Tiger leaders. The Defence Secretary phoned Brigadier Shivendra Silva and ordered him not to take them prisoner, but to kill them. When I got there, I saw a pile of dead bodies. I can confidently state that those who ordered the killing of the people who surrendered were Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Brigadier Shivendra Silva.
The army officer gave us 46 photographs he said he'd taken of the immediate aftermath of this mass killing. They're too gruesome to show in any detail, but the data embedded in these digital stills shows they were all taken within a few minutes of each other, and they were all taken at the same location. The dead bodies have been dragged into lines, and there are scores of them. The 2 Tamil Tiger political leaders among them. This journalist lost her eye 10 years ago whilst reporting on the Sri Lankan civil war. She knew the 2 Tiger political leaders. The night before they were killed, one of them called her, saying they wished to surrender. She sought guarantees for their safety.
I spoke to the UN Special Envoy, and he said to me, I have spoken to the President of Sri Lanka, and he has assured me, and I trust his assurances, that they will be allowed to surrender and that they will have full security guarantees directly from the President. I have no doubt.
When the war ended, Brigadier Shivendra Silva was hailed as a hero and promoted to Major General, after which he retired, aged 45. Any future action by the United Nations to sanction a formal inquiry into possible war crimes in Sri Lanka will start here, in this building, in New York. And ironically, it was to this very building that the Sri Lankan government sent Major General Shivendra Silva. It was a post-war reward assignment to be his country's deputy ambassador to the United Nations. We received no response to repeated requests for an interview with Shivendra Silva, so I went to see him anyway. Good morning, Major General. My name's Jonathan Miller from Channel 4 News.
Yeah.
Sir, you're accused of war crimes. Can I ask what your response is to this, please?
Me?
Yes.
That is by some people.
Well,
maybe it is the people who are LTT and the people who are really involved, who are supporting LTT.
But Major General, with respect, one of your officers has told us directly that you were ordered by Gotabaya Rajapaksa to execute surrendering Tamil Tigers, and that's exactly what happened, isn't it?
Can you exactly tell me if somebody has told you that some senior officer, can you tell me the name of the officer who had told like that?
Of course I cannot tell you the name,
So
sir, with
then
respect,
you have to ask from that officer, because no such thing has happened.
I'm coming to you because it's soldiers under your command who are accused of these things, accused of rapes, accused of killing civilians, women and children, accused of covering evidence.
It is Channel 4, and only you have narrated, and you are the only one who is accusing. No one else is accusing
It's
us.
not me making the accusation, sir, with
You
respect.
are the one.
It's this officer that was under your command has told us directly of these accusations.
You are the only one who is accusing, and your channel, okay?
There is prima facie evidence that crimes against humanity and grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions were committed. They were committed through the principle of command responsibility, directed by both military and civilian leaders. All of this is sufficient in now triggering a responsibility by the international community to bring to justice, to investigate, and if need be, bring to justice these individuals who have committed these most heinous crimes.
The Sri Lankan government wants to move on, denying all charges. Sri Lanka's Tamils say they can't move on until there's justice. This year has seen Colonel Gaddafi indicted and General Mladic put on trial in The Hague. But in Sri Lanka, there has been no reckoning. Yet the evidence keeps piling up.
Well, Jonathan Miller's with me here in the studio. We saw you doorstep the Major General, but what about his boss, the man who really gave the orders, the Defence Secretary, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa?
Well, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, I spoke to him directly on the telephone, and he denied privately to me all of the allegations that I put to him and those that were contained in this film. It's got to be said, though, John, it's quite clear to me that the government in Sri Lanka, the three brothers who run this country, are seemingly increasingly rattled by the persistence of these allegations. And they follow this UN report in April, which said that there were credible allegations of war crimes which must be investigated.
And perhaps one of the most remarkable developments is this speech last night from the former president of Sri Lanka, a Sinhalese woman, who really does take a very strong, really supportive role of what we have found.
Yes, this is Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga, who's better known as CBK in Sri Lanka. She made a speech over the weekend, actually, John, it was on Sunday night, to an invited group in Colombo itself, in which she broke ranks with the political elite. Now, this is a very significant thing. She's a Sinhalese political leader, and she spoke particularly and specifically of her shock and her horror and that experienced by her son and her daughter on watching the Channel 4 documentary, Sri Lanka's Killing Fields.
I shall remember till the end of my days the morning recently when my 28-year-old son called me, sobbing on the phone to say how ashamed he was to call himself a Sinhalese and Lankan. After seeing on the UK television a 50-minute documentary called The Killing Fields of Sri Lanka, which I also had the great misfortune of seeing.
Well, it's very courageous, but where does this all go?
Well, it was courageous of her, John, because you know this is a country in which the Rajapaksa regime does not tolerate dissent. But as I say, the allegations keep mounting up, and the UN report is what to watch now. It's up to the Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, to recommend to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva that they now take up this report, which his panel of experts has produced and which recommends that those allegations be further investigated.
Jonathan Miller.